Australia's new law protecting children online is putting pressure on U.S. lawmakers to pass their own version. Gary Lane has that story and more from the CBN Newsroom. Gary?
Gordon, Australia's law bans social media for children under age 16, the first time any nation has taken such a step. Now U.S. senators are calling on their colleagues in the House to take up a measure they passed over the summer. Lori Johnson reports.
Politicians in the U.S. and around the world tend to agree our children and teens need to be protected from the dangers of social media. However, lawmakers disagree about the best way to do that.
Senate leaders on both sides of the aisle are urging the House to pass the Kids Online Safety Act before their Christmas vacation. Earlier this year, it breezed through the Senate 91-3.
These bills will provide the appropriate guardrails necessary to protect kids against online threats.
The measure calls for tech companies to program default settings to their highest security level, filter out posts that could lead to online harassment, and dismantle dangerous algorithms.
We've heard stories about kids who were going through a depressed episode, and all of a sudden they were getting fed content that was encouraging them to take their own lives.
Social media use among children and teens is linked to eating disorders, low self-esteem, sleep disturbances, and more.
I think most children will start walking away from their faith when they get their smartphones and they get social media, because it's teaching them such a different worldview of different than the Bible.
Under the proposed measure, kids would still be allowed to use social media. That's different from the just-passed Australian law, which imposes an outright ban for those under 16. It was backed by parents like Wayne Holdsworth, whose son committed suicide after a man pretending to be a girl convinced him to share intimate pictures and then threatened to post them online if he didn't give him money.
Anyone that says that this is not a good idea has not lived through my life, nor the hundreds of mums and dads that I've met in the last 8 months that have had their kids extorted and taken their lives as well.
Critics of the Australian law, however, say kids can easily break it.
With no digital ID, according to the government last night, unless you're doing facial recognition, I really struggle to see how this could be enforced with anything more than checking a box to say you're over a certain age, which is basically what we have now.
Meanwhile, the UK is considering a similar ban, backed by parents like Stuart Stevens, whose son Ollie was murdered after a dispute on social media.
I can't show you any of the stuff that we saw on his phone, but it's horrific. And a lot of that stuff you can't unsee, and especially as a child.
The ACLU says the Kids Online Safety Act violates the First Amendment by censoring free speech. Social media companies say kids have a right to access information on their platforms, which they say in many cases is beneficial. Lori Johnson, CBN News.